Hi, lovely humans. I am jumping on here as I feel called to kind of finally share my birth story of my son after, 2.5 years. I've kind of dabbled with expressing a little bit, but never fully gone into it. And I feel I'm kind of healed and in a place where I feel like it'd actually be really beneficial to share, and also might help others, and just kind of shining a light on the subject of informed consent, which, if you didn't know, is a human right. Okay. And the reason I start by saying that I want to shine the light on the informed consent because my human right to informed consent was violated. And this is why I'm sharing my story. So, became pregnant with my son in February, March of 2018. A very, what did they say, low risk pregnancy. I had just come back from a month's yoga teacher training in India. I was doing yoga every day. I'm a massage therapist. So yes, very aware of my body, very active person. So I did all of the standard care, you let your GP know, then they come out and do all of their antenatal checks and they chat with you and things like that. I'd also done a antenatal course that was run by the local university, in which they had, I think it was about 6 weeks, but they had like different subject matters each week, one of which that's just sticking out in my mind, called Am I Allowed? All of those questions were, am I allowed to do this? Am I allowed to do that? And one of my questions, because I was planning on giving birth at home, was, am I allowed? Are they going to say that I'm not allowed to give birth at home? And was actually told by the people running the program that, they can't actually, the doctors can't actually allow or disallow you to do anything because it's your choice. However, that's a wonderful, wonderful story. However, in reality, or my experience of my reality, it didn't quite work out that way. So we'll jump on down to pretty much me being 39 weeks pregnant. So on the 30th of October, I had a growth scan appointment because they'd done that fundal measurement and it had popped up a little bit, so they were concerned that he was going to be big, and my blood pressure was also slightly raised. Now, from what I've come to learn now, following the post birth, come to know that actually a slightly raised BP is relatively normal. Like past 36 weeks, your body's basically ready to give birth, from any point onwards as well. So certain tests can kind of reduce in accuracy because, the female body is just incredible, changing constantly. So, back to the 30th of October, I had a growth scan appointment, went down to the hospital to find out that they hadn't booked in the scan. So they told me to come back next week. So that was fine. I was happy to do that. Tuesday, the 6th of November, we are now at. I had the consultant appointment. My blood pressure was checked once and it was slightly high. So there are 3 levels of blood pressure. You have mild, moderate and severe. Mine was always mild and occasionally popped up into the moderate section. Never went into the high section. And this is according to the NICE guidelines of hypertension in pregnancy. So because of the slightly high blood pressure that they just checked once, they said that they're going to have to recommend that I go upstairs onto the ward to be monitored and checked. Now, I'd been monitored before, so I didn't have a problem with this. They'd always, sent me home. So, I was happy to go on up. So I headed on up. And they did mention the word preeclampsia as they do the kind of urine dipstick tests. And it showed that I had a little bit of protein in my urine. once again, come to find out that's quite normal once you get past a certain stage in your pregnancy. So what they wanted to do was a more in-depth urine test, which is called a PCR test, to measure the levels of protein in the urine. And that takes 24 hours to come back. So during that time, because they mentioned the word preeclampsia, I started to get a bit panicky and worried. I was on my own. You know, my husband was at work. I hadn't told him to stop working to take his paternity leave. And so, so I was in the hospital researching preeclampsia. And because I just had the slightly raised blood pressure, and I knew that was in the mild range, not the moderate or the severe at that point. And then I was, looking up info about preeclampsia, and particularly the protein levels in the urine. And I found out that in order for protein in urine to be classed as a symptom of preeclampsia, it has to be over a certain level. So you have to have over 300 mmol of protein in your urine. So we now come on to Wednesday morning, and I now know this information. So the doctor comes around to do his rounds and tells me that I have preeclampsia and that I need to be induced. And at this point, I decide to ask the questions. So I'd done a hypnobirthing course in which they use like the brain analogy. So what are the benefits? What are the risks? What are the alternatives? What is my intuition telling me? And what happens if we just do nothing? Okay, so I asked the doctor directly. I said, are the protein, because he told me you have preeclampsia, and I said, are the protein levels in my urine significant? Me knowing at this point they have to be over 300. And he said, yes, they were. And now he didn't say this in a particularly nice way. I kind of almost felt like I was a naughty child that was, I could tell that he was frustrated that I had questioned him, which I now know, because I've done some healing, triggered a response in me. And kind of like shut me down and basically disassociated me from my body at that point. So he said that I had preeclampsia. He told me that my body knows it has preeclampsia, and so the induction will be quick. And, all of those kind of scaremongering things. It's, the risk of death to myself and my baby. So I accepted the induction because I thought I had preeclampsia. So the midwife pops in the first 24-hour pessary, and I then ask her for the actual figures of the protein in my urine, which I'm then told by the midwife that they have lost that sample. And I remember a couple of things running through my mind at that point. The first one was confusion, because the doctor had just told me that I had preeclampsia, so I didn't understand why the midwife was then telling me that they'd lost the urine test. So like, how could he be telling me that I've got preeclampsia when she's telling me that the test isn't there? Like, what was he basing his information on? So I kind of had a bit of evidence there that I've been lied to, but basically my cognitive dissonance was so high that I just didn't believe that it was possible that doctors, nurses and midwives could lie. I just didn't think that, even on like a moral, personal level, like I just did not believe that could happen. Naive little Chloe. So after this I'd had this information and I just kind of like ignored it, or just didn't really want to, I guess, deal with it. Disassociation once again. So we then get to, that was it. I gave another sample of urine because I was like, okay, they've lost that one, give another sample, and then I'll find out tomorrow. So we now get on to Thursday morning, and there's a different doctor doing the morning rounds, and I ask her what the protein levels in my urine are, and her response to me is, "Are you a midwife or something?" And I said, "No, I'm not a midwife. I just want to make an informed choice about my body." And then she never answered my question. No one ever told me what my actual levels were. And at that point, I just assumed that I had preeclampsia, because I had told myself that surely if they realised that I didn't have it, they would come and tell me. Oh, wait, you don't have it. So after this this doctor leaves, I then get told by the midwife that to take the pessary out because they're really, really busy and they're not actually going to go on to the next stage of induction. And so I go, okay, if that's the case, then I'd just like to go home, because why am I sitting in a hospital bed taking up space when I don't want to be here? Like, I'm not comfortable really in hospitals, you know, the fluorescent lighting. I'm not in my home environment. I'm around strangers. I don't have the support of my husband because they can't stay in the ward. And so they say, yes, that's fine, you can go home, but obviously everything needs to be signed off by the doctor. So by this point also, I have contacted my husband and said, please, you know, get on your paternity leave. So yeah, so he was with me from the Thursday afternoon. So yeah, induction's been cancelled because they're too busy, which once again is confusing, because I'm like, well, they're telling me that I have preeclampsia and this is a serious condition, but they're cancelling my induction because they're really busy and they can't do the next stage. Anyway, it gets to Thursday evening and I've been sitting there for like 5 hours now, like waiting to go home. And another doctor and I go up to the desk and say, like, I'm going to go home now. And they say, oh, okay, we'll get someone to come over. So the doctor then, different doctor once again, comes over and starts laughing and says, I hear you don't want to be here. And to which point my husband tells this doctor, I see that you're laughing, but this isn't really that funny. She then basically tells me that she's not going to let me go home because all inductions are back on again. And then she has to leave because she gets called on her beeper to some more important thing to do. Totally fine. So she goes off and does that. And then I have another doctor come in. Turns out to be the same doctor that actually told me that I did have the significant levels of protein in my urine. And when he came in to speak to me, the difference between when he spoke to me the first time and he spoke to me the second time was that my husband was with me. So first time I was on my own, and, you know, he was, told me that I had preeclampsia and that my induction was going to be really quick, etc., etc. And his demeanour and attitude is completely different when he's interacting with my husband there. It was almost like Jekyll and Hyde. Now, I remember being in quite a heightened state of stress at this point because I felt like I was stuck in the middle. You know, I had my husband kind of like on one side, like fighting my corner, and then I also had like the doctors, you know, getting kind of like aggy and wanting to do things their way. And I just remember thinking, like, I'm trying to get a baby out of my body right now. I do not need any additional stress. So I remember I remember actively not asking, because I remember thinking like I was going to ask him like why he lied, but I knew, but something within me was just like, no, that's going to be too stressful a conversation to have, like when you're literally, you know, supposedly have preeclampsia and it's serious, and you know, all of that sort of stuff. So I didn't end up asking the question, but then he also was had a very, very different demeanor. He was very kind of understanding and accepting. And he basically agreed that we could go home for the evening and then come back in the morning. So this was going home on the Thursday evening, coming back on Friday morning. So, where are we up to now? Yeah, Thursday evening rolls around and he says that I can go. So we leave our stuff actually in the little cabinet that's next to the bed, because I literally had arranged to go back in at like 10 o'clock the next morning. So we leave the hospital. I go home. What did I do? I think we had like an Indian curry. And then because and then in the morning, actually, I booked some like reflexology because I was bang on 40 weeks. And, you know, from that point onwards, you know, the reflexologists and acupuncturists will happily work on you. So I, went and did that. And then, went into the hospital on the Friday morning. So got to the hospital to be told that apparently I had discharged myself last night. I didn't discharge myself. I left all my stuff in a cupboard, like next to the bed, because that's what I thought the arrangement was. I hadn't signed any discharge papers at all. And then was also told by the receptionist that inductions had all been cancelled again because it was too busy. About an hour later, I was then told, inductions are all back on again. So Friday got into my ward, got into my bed, and then they put in the first pessary, or the first stage of the next stage of the pessary. So the first pessary that they put in, the 24-hour one, is basically like a tampon with like a really, really long string. And the second one is a gel, or like a little tablet behind the cervix. Okay, so this is not a comfortable procedure, right? It involves an entire hand, right, up your vagina. Okay, rooting around in there to try and find the cervix. It's not comfortable. So they popped that one in about midday, and then I was expecting to get another one in the evening around like 6 hours later. So Friday evening comes along. I'm in my bed. No midwife comes along to check on me. And basically because it's so busy again. And all inductions have been cancelled again. But it's so busy that they don't even have staff to come and tell you that it's too busy. And it was at this point where I just had enough. I had enough of the stop starts, of them, you know, kind of telling me that this was really serious, but then not acting like it was very serious. And so I think at that point I just went, because there was 3 other ladies in the ward with me, and they were all having monitoring. So like the beeping was going, like there was fluorescent lights, and I was just finding it really hard to sleep. So I think I ended up going into the bathroom actually and spending the rest of the night there. And then went back into my little section in the morning and just closed it off. I put my eye mask on and just bounced on my ball, and I was just in one of those, I didn't want to talk to anybody unless it was my husband. So I sat there with my mask on and my ball on. I think when I took my mask off at some point, somebody had like left me some breakfast or some toast or something like that, but I was just like, no, thank you. So this is now Saturday morning. So Saturday morning, we actually have a really, really lovely consultant man come round who says, you know, let's go for this induction, absolutely authorised. basically me to have up to 3 more of the tablet pessaries popped behind my cervix. So first one gets popped up there. Around about midday again. And then basically we leave the hospital and go into town, have some nice food, and yeah, just try and get the oxytocin flowing rather than all of these stress hormones that were kind of pumping through my body with the hospital experience. So yes, I remember we went out for some food, popped home because we live around 5 minutes away from the hospital. Popped home for some food, and I remember it feeling like quite uncomfortable. I was finding it difficult to kind of like lie naturally or sit naturally. Everything was just getting a bit uncomfortable. So headed on back to the hospital. I knew that as long as I was back in the hospital by 6 o'clock for the next pessary, that, you know, what they don't know isn't going to hurt them. So I, went back, and then they popped the next pessary in at about 6 o'clock. And I knew around by 10 o'clock that it was going to be happening. So I had the emptying of the bowels and was finding it. And I just had that moment. I just wanted to be on my own making weird noises. And right behind like the little reception desk in the ward, there was like a room on its own with no one in it, just like one bed. I had like a bouncing ball and like this weird swing thing. And so I basically went to one of the midwives, and the midwives, I have to say, were all lovely, apart from their, accomplishing to not actually being truthful with patients. And so yeah, she said that's absolutely fine, called my husband, got him to come back down, because I also knew that if I didn't call him soon enough, he was going to fall asleep and, maybe not wake up if I had called him, like having the baby. So, yeah, he turned up, and I think this was around about like 10, 11 o'clock or so. Anyway, at that point, I was like 1 centimetre dilated, thinking, holy moly, if this is how intense it feels at 1 centimetre, I'm not sure I'm going to make it without any painkillers. And I think she'd given me some codeine. I'd had some codeine just a little bit beforehand. So yes, an hour later, I am 8 centimetres dilated. Okay. So when they say, a centimetre an hour, it doesn't always work like that, okay? We women we do not follow a tick line system. We are individual, we are unique, we are consistently inconsistent. It is part of our beautiful nature. So yeah, Jack turns up, I'm 8 centimetres dilated, gets sent up to the delivery ward. And then push Jonah out at 4:28 a.m, 9 pounds 12 ounces, with a codeine, which would have worn off by that point. So yes, he was born vaginally, so no need for any kind of other interventions. Yes. So yeah, that was the birth. And then we get on to the aftermath. So after it wasn't even like straight away after the birth. It was maybe a couple of weeks or so. So so midwives come around and do checks like just after a few days after you've had your baby to, make sure that you're all okay, your bits are all right and stuff like that. And I actually ended up telling the midwife that came round that, there was a bit of a weird thing. Like, he told me I had preeclampsia, but then they said they'd lost the test results, so I'm kind of not sure. But she didn't write it down in the notes that she was taking, and she didn't really seem too bothered at all. And then I think it was maybe a couple months later, I just was really curious, and I was like, oh, well, I'll request my notes. So I called the number that you call here in Swansea to request your notes. And I told the lady on the phone, like, what I thought had happened. I said that I was unsure, like there was a little bit of a discrepancy. And I just wanted to check what was going on. And she basically advised me, as well as requesting my maternity note, she was like, you need to also request your test results, because they will not include the test results in the maternity notes as standard. So I then request all of my maternity notes, and I get them. And the test results as well. And now I'm no medical expert. So yeah, these test results, I'm kind of looking at them and then having to Google to be like, right, okay, is this normal? Is this not? And so I can tell you, because I had 2 PCR tests done. Okay. And so the test results, so I don't know if you remember the figure, we've got a 300 mmol for the for the protein in the urine to be considered significant. Now, my test results of the 2 were 17 mmol and 18 mmol. So quite far away from 300 mmol. So actually looking at my kind of test results and everything, there was nothing wrong with me at all. I had a slightly raised blood pressure, which is normal, and that was it. There was literally nothing wrong with me. And I had been told that I had preeclampsia, that my body knew I had preeclampsia. My induction was going to be quick. Interestingly, he said it was going to be quick on the Tuesday, and I gave birth to my son on the Saturday after them cancelling the induction because they were too busy 3 times. Okay. So after kind of like digesting this information, I ended up sending them just a big email, basically going, what's going on? Like, is this normal for you to like lie to people? And not quite be truthful with what's happening, or, with their medical information. And basically then it was just a waiting game for a reply. I think they said, I think the standard generic thing was like 30 days to reply. So I think it was like after 25 days I emailed and they said, oh, your response isn't due yet. Contact us again like once it's due. So when the response was due, I emailed saying my response is due, what's the delay? This then continued for another like 6 weeks. So they took longer than they stated to reply, according to their own regulations. Okay, so I'm just going to get it out because I actually have it here. So I then received a reply dated the 9th of August, 2019. Okay, so I think I got all my maternity notes on like the start of May. And that was it. Sent my complaint email at the start of May, and then 9th of August is when they replied. So I am going to just read out the paragraph that's just in reference to the preeclampsia, because it's like a 4-page reply, but none of it not all of it is relevant specifically to what I'm talking about here. So it says, you were seen on the 7th of the 11th, which was the Wednesday, at 10:45 by the consultant on the morning ward round. The consultant noted admitted with PET, which is preeclampsia. I've Googled it. What does this mean? But his plan describes commence IOL, induction of labour, and chase PCR, which was the urine test. The PCR had been collected at 11:20 on the 6th, so the day before, but was only available on the computer system at 10:52. So 10:45, he's written down here that that's what his note said, admitted with PET, commence IOL, chase PCR. However, at the time where he told me that I had preeclampsia, 10:45, according to his own note-taking, but the results weren't even available on the system until 7 minutes after he told me that I'd had preeclampsia. When I read this was literal confirmation for me. I couldn't quite believe that they'd written it down in black and white. And that's when I realised that they didn't realise either the implications of what they were writing and the seriousness of it. And then, so that was only available on the computer system at 10:52. Presumably, as the result was not on the system at 10:45, it was assumed that the sample had been lost, which is what the midwife told me. Sample's been lost. It says, as it can be seen that a further sample for PCR was collected at 11:30 on the 7th of the 11th. So that's 45 minutes after he's told me that I have preeclampsia, they're collecting a second PCR test. And then it says, on review of the Indigo system, we can see that the result from the test on the 6th of the 11th was only available at 10:52 on the 7th of the 11th, and the result from the test sent on the 7th of the 11th was available at 11:33 on the 8th of the 11th. Both of these tests proved to be within the normal range. Within the normal range. And I've been told that I have preeclampsia. I can confirm that I have discussed your case with consultant. He is apologetic and accepts that he assumed you had preeclampsia rather than pregnancy-induced hypertension and should have awaited the result of the PCR before making the diagnosis. You were suffering from pregnancy-induced hypertension. This was news to me. This was the first time that I had read that's basically what they, after looking at the notes, like they're telling me you had this. Now, that is not why I accepted the induction. I accepted the induction because I had preeclampsia. I would never have accepted an induction based on solely a mild hypertension, which I'd been experiencing for several weeks anyway. And another factor that added to the kind of hypertension is we had a family bereavement. So my husband's grandfather actually passed away when I was around 36 weeks pregnant. It says, back to the paragraph here. You were suffering from pregnancy-induced hypertension. Options for management after 37 weeks of pregnancy do include induction of labour. However, that isn't a doctor's decision to make. It is my decision to make because I am the person birthing. And he says, I apologise that an incorrect assumption was made regarding preeclampsia. I believe this was a genuine mistake rather than any attempt to deliberately mislead you. Now, this is what I had a problem with, and I emailed them back because he says, I believe this was a genuine mistake rather than any attempt to deliberately mislead you. However, I'd asked the doctor a direct question on the 7th of the 11th saying, are the protein levels in my urine significant? And he had told me yes at 10:45 when the results weren't available on the system until 10:52. Written in black and white here on their little response. So after realising this and sending them an email going, you do realise what you're admitting to here, I did some further researching and actually looked at I actually ended up reading the the guidelines that doctors have for informed consent, and basically realised that by assuming that I had preeclampsia, but telling me that I had preeclampsia and me accepting induction, that what that had done is it had violated my right to informed choice because I'd been lied to. I haven't been given the correct information. So I can't it's physically not possible for me to make an informed choice if I don't have the correct information. So I then did some more researching and found out that that is a violation of human rights. So there was a bit of back and forth as they wanted me to come in for a meeting to try and resolve it. You know, they kind of talk the talk. And so I went in for this meeting, and it was, you know, it was kind of like a lot of anticipation going into it, as I was, you know, really upset with the way that I'd been treated. So yeah, went in, and they were, you know, they were relatively understanding. Although now looking back at it, I know that it was just, you know, it was set up that way. Like, it was clear that they had spoken to their lawyers, and been given certain things to say. One of which being, because I kept using the word lie, because he lied to me. And the doctor there said, oh, I don't believe that he lied to you. And it was at this point that I had to explain to a doctor what the dictionary definition of a lie was. Which, you know, is just a weird thing to do. Yeah, having to explain to a doctor what a lie is. And then I explained that I'd actually asked this doctor a direct question, and he'd lied to me. And it was at that point that they said, oh, okay, well, that's new information. We didn't know this. And we're going to, so we're not going to be able to resolve the situation today. Now, thinking back to that comment now, the whole information that we didn't know, I'd sent that information in the initial email. I'd told them in the initial email that I had asked the doctor the direct question. So there we go. Yes, just one of those things where you kind of tell yourself all the way through, if they knew that they'd done this, then they would apologise and they'd try and fix it. And I did believe that. And then it gets to a point where you have to stop believing the kind of ideals and the lies, and you just have to see things for what they are. And yeah, what that was it was just, you know, they were just trying to fob me off, really, in my opinion. They were trying to fob me off. They were trying to, I think they were just trying to make it really difficult, so I just went away, you know. So yeah, it got to the point where, oh, that was it. So after this meeting, they said they were going to send me the meeting notes from it. And then I think it was like 6 weeks or 2 months later, the meeting was in that September. And then it got to November, and they still hadn't sent me the meeting notes. And then they told me that the person that did it was off sick. So that's why I wasn't getting the meeting notes, and they didn't know when she was going to be back at work. So they just didn't know when I was going to be getting the meeting notes. And then I was asking, well, who's specifically dealing with this case? And then that's when I found out that essentially no one was dealing with it. It was just kind of being passed around from person to person, as and when I contacted them to be like, so what's going on? And then it just got to the point for me where I just had enough. So I ended up contacting a lawyer, and starting the process to sue them for violation of human rights. Now, when the lawyer came to take, you know, statements and information, he actually informed me that the human rights violation, you only have 1 year to do that. And I just thought that was very interesting timing, because it was around the time that they were saying, like, oh, this person's sick, we don't have access to the notes. It was right around that time that it was the year mark. So the skeptic in me just wonders whether they were just pushing time. Yeah, just to kind of wear you down, really, and see if you'll just give up. So yes, lawyer came around, gave him my statements. Then you have a psychiatrist comes around, and because essentially you have to prove that you have kind of suffered, and because basically, because I didn't die and my son didn't die and there was no catastrophic injuries, essentially, they're like, it doesn't really matter. I did actually report the doctor to the General Medical Council, and essentially they were very lovely in the way that they responded, but they basically told me exactly like, it's not serious enough. They were like, yeah, sorry it happened, but it's not serious enough, so there we go. So he's going to keep his job. He still works, to my knowledge, he still works there, still works in that ward. Who knows how many other women have been lied to? Who knows? Because one thing is for certain, it can't just be me. I can't just be one anomaly in this whole system. There's no way. That's just what life experience has taught me. So, yes, back onto the lawsuit. So, yeah, Mr. Lawyerman puts together his arguments. He has his evidence from the psychiatrist because I only found out that I definitely didn't have preeclampsia when Jonah was like 6 months old, and I'd had a really like great like first 6 months of Jonah's life. And when I found out this information, it really did like my whole kind of like belief system about the world came crashing down, because all I'd believed up until this point is just like doctors, nurses, like medical staff, like particularly with birth, like, oh my God, it's just the best. They just want the best. They have your best interest in heart. They've got the baby's best interest in heart. Like no one would ever I just didn't, I was very naive, and I just, didn't think that they could even morally lie to people. But that's not my experience. Kind of my whole belief system, faith in the systems just came crumbling down. But it was all for the better, and for good reason, and for a higher purpose. The lawsuit took a little while. Obviously, lots of delays, just letters going back and forth. And then Rona kicked off. So it was just like, going to be one of those delays. Even the lawyer said it could take up to 2 years. So I was aware that it was going to take a while. Just, lots of paperwork back and forth, like signing things. And then they have to kind of send like information off to other doctors to see whether they would have done the same thing. And I always thought it was really interesting, when these doctors would reply, because they would always say, they would always say, oh, I would have done this. This is what I would have done. This is what I would have done. Not one of them said, this is what I would advise, but ultimately it's the patient's decision. Not one said that. They were just like, this is what I would do. And I'm there thinking like, does the lady that's giving birth not matter in this scenario, like at all? And from my experience, it turns out it doesn't. It's to me, it's just a system. It's what is convenient for them. It's what's going to be easiest for them. And what is following their rules and their normal. So after lots of back and forth, a few delays, and not one apology from anyone since about being lied to. Not one. Not one kind of bit of remorse, really. It just was like, kind of seemed like one of those where it's just like, oh, whoops, this lady's figured us out. Like, let's ignore her and hope that she goes away. That's not going to happen. And yes, so I'm super proud of myself for like sticking up, because it's like literally the scariest thing that I've ever done is kind of like, suing a big, huge kind of like a huge kind of like system where they have resources and I'm just me on my own. So after lots of back and forth, I think, yeah, my lawyer ended up putting in an offer. He basically said, here's your offer for settling out of court. That was it, because basically, here's your offer to settle out of court, otherwise we'll go to court. And I was pretty confident that if I went to court that I would be fine, because literally written in black and white. And yeah, and I got the call. I think it was last summer. I can't quite remember the day. I know that I cried though, and I got the call that they had accepted the out of court settlement. So yeah, just, you know, kind of validation, confirmation. It was their kind of like admitting without actually admitting it that they had done something, because why would they give me like thousands of pounds in compensation if they didn't think that they did anything wrong? So that is my kind of rambly birth story there for you. If you have any questions or any details are like confusing, because I can get a bit rambly and go off on tangents sometimes, then yeah, hit me up with a question. I'd be more than happy to chat and respond and connect with you guys. Right. Much love. Hope you all have a wonderful day. Bye.